Hello and welcome to Nautilus TV, your trusted source of maritime trade union news and insights. With me today are Rob Coston and Sarah Robinson. Hello. We've got a great lineup of news for you today, including the launch of our latest Maritime Barometer report, members at the Royal Fleet Auxiliary vote to go on strike again, and we talk with Captain Mark Maguire about what it's like to captain some of the world's biggest container ships. But first, a message from our sponsors for this episode, the University of Gibraltar. Mark Dickinson, General Secretary of Nautilus International, was recently at the NATO summit in Brussels with US Masters Mates and Pilots colleague Don Marcus. They were there calling on NATO member states to reinvest in their merchant navies. Rob, why are we calling on NATO member states to reinvest in their merchant navies, and why now?
We're calling on NATO member states to reinvest in their merchant navies after years of serious decline. The UK, for example, has gone from having about 5% of the world's gross tonnage 25 years ago down to about 0.5% now, which is a really serious issue. Of course, in recent years, there's been a lot more uncertainty on the global stage. We've had the war in Ukraine, we had COVID, of course, that's really highlighted how important it is to this country and other NATO members to have a merchant navy that's able to keep us all supplied during times of crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. And you say keep us all supplied, but it's also a matter of national security, isn't it? So in previous conflicts, merchant navy seafarers have supported naval firepower as well. So it's really important to invest in our merchant navies in times of conflict as well.
Absolutely, yeah. If you look at something like the Falklands War, an operation like that wouldn't be possible at the moment with the number of trained seafarers that the UK, for example, has. Even if we go back to the Iraq War, which is not that long ago, an operation like that for the United States wouldn't necessarily be possible anymore because of the decline in the national fleet and in organisations like the Royal Fleet Auxiliary. So yeah, it's really important for all of our security that these countries start investing again.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why we took our message to the heart of NATO member countries in Brussels. And we can hear a little bit more from Mark Dickinson, who I interviewed earlier.
We called on NATO to get the NATO member states to be thinking about this issue and say, how can we can't let this happen. How do we transport? How do we fulfill our mission? How do we transport the necessary hardware and people in support of the defence of NATO members without that mercantile marine merchant navy component? The answer is they know they can't. And so we think we have a compelling case. We made a strong, compelling case. We appeal for them to keep dialogue open with us, make it ongoing. And Don and I pledged to do more work on this and to come back to them with more considered research to demonstrate the severity of the situation which we set out. It's clear in my mind that they need to do something. Obviously, we've now got a new government, we've got a new incoming president who has some very
of the United States.
Very vocal, yes, United States. Sorry, thanks, Helen. And they had some very forthright views about NATO and NATO members and their spending on military spending investment, 3% of GDP, and I think the necessary investment in mercantile marines is by relatively speaking small change against the military budgets of the certainly the major NATO members. I think we have to be part of that conversation. There has to be major investment in mercantile marine merchant navy in ships, but fundamentally in people as well. And we need to, we spend a lot of our time, presenting to government. We need smart funding to be 100%.
Yeah, right? That's here in the UK.
Here in the UK, smart funding 100%. We know that in the Netherlands it's 100%. We know that many European neighbouring countries and Singapore and the Chinese investing huge amounts of money in their people. And we have to be in that space. This is what we have to do, and it's really tough because when government budgets at the moment, there's a spending review in the UK imminent. And it's a hard sell, but I think it's absolute must. We also need ship owners to step forward and say, hey, we're going to commit, we're going to take these people on. That's great. 100% really does change the dynamic for us, because now you're not one of the most expensive places to train a UK seafarer, an officer, and frankly ratings too. You're now competitive, and we like the quality of people that come out. It becomes, I'll tell you now, it's one less excuse for the ship owners, right? Because this is what I hear: oh, it's too expensive to do. You can't train UK cadets; they're too expensive. I can go elsewhere and get them. And then, of course, we need to look at incentives and support and boosting support to make sure that they remain competitive going forward once they've qualified. But I think ship owners need to be clear about what they want, and do they support the UK flag or not? Do they support UK shipping? Do they want to be here? Do they want to train and employ our people? And if there's things we can do to help them answer that question with a positive yes, then frankly, they need to talk to us, because it's an open door for us. We want to work in partnership with companies like that. But for companies who are simply here because they think the tonnage tax quite sweet, and they're not really interested in training cadets, I'll pay the pilot payments and or we'll train the cadets, but we're not interested in them once they're done. They're not really the type of company that I want to be working with.
Nautilus members at the Royal Fleet Auxiliary have once again voted for strike action, strengthening our mandate to fight for fair pay at a service which has seen 30% pay cuts in real terms since 2010. Rob, you spoke to our colleague, Nautilus International Director of Organising, Martin Gray, about that action. What's the latest?
Well, so the latest is that negotiations are ongoing after we had a second ballot. So Nautilus is required by law to reballot our members regularly to continue our strike action. The result that was returned was resounding. The members are even more in favour of strike action and action short of a strike than they were the first time around. It really shows their resolve, and it also shows that having taken this historic step of doing it for the first time, they understand the pressure that's brought and the positive results they can hopefully get from it. Many members will be wondering when they might be taking strike action. Now that they've voted for it, the answer to that is, of course, those strategies are being put together at the moment, and Martin discussed that with me when we did our interview.
Sounds good. Let's hear some more from that interview now.
The reballot for continuation of industrial action ended on the 4th of November. We had a 63% turnout, which for a workforce that spends more than half of the year away from home at sea, and with the legislation that we have to follow being so prohibitive and restrictive, is an incredible result. It's absolutely astounding to get a 63% turnout. The members very strongly in favour of industrial action short of a strike, with 97% of those participating voting in favour of that. And we had 90% in favour of strike action. So we have a renewed mandate for industrial action against Ministry of Defence and Royal Fleet Auxiliary by the membership, who is determined to receive fair pay for the work they do. For far too long, they're underpaid.
I'd just say, Martin, I'd point out that's significantly higher than it was in the first ballot. So they're even more convinced, I think, that it's necessary.
It absolutely is. I think a lot of the reasoning behind that is the first ballot was the first ever ballot that we'd taken Royal Fleet Auxiliary members through. And there's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of concern over the practicalities of how it would work. And indeed, as we move towards that historic first day on the 15th of August 2024, where we held strike action at Royal Fleet Auxiliary for the first time ever, there was an awful lot of concern and uncertainty. I think what the members have seen is that strike action isn't as challenging, as complicated, as convoluted as what they may have thought it would be, but they have seen that it does have significant impacts on their employer, and they have seen that what it does is get more people engaged around the dispute and get people talking about the pay and conditions with which they're operating under.
Yeah, I mean, and just to give some figures here, it was 79% voted for strike action the first time around, and I think you said it's 90% this time, and it was 85% voted for action short of a strike in the first ballot, and that's now up to 97%. So it's a really big and significant jump, and I think that reflects the strength of feeling among the members after months of fighting for this.
Yeah, we also had an extra 3% turnout. So it was 60% was the original turnout for that first ballot, it was 63% this time. But equally, if we just look at the raw numbers, we have had an increase in RFA membership. So the number of Nautilus members that are employed by the Royal Fleet Auxiliary increased by more than 50 in the period between that first ballot and the second ballot that we've held. So not only do we have more members there, but we have a greater proportion of that higher density of membership willing to take action, which I think sends a very, very clear signal to the employer, to the Ministry of Defence, to the Royal Fleet Auxiliary leadership, that more needs to be done to resolve this and resolve this in a way in which it's going to be to the member satisfaction.
Great. And obviously throughout the balloting process and subsequently, those negotiations have carried on. I know it's very sensitive, but is there anything you can reveal at this point about how that's been going and what the future might hold there?
We received a written offer that was put to us on the 24th of October, which we've discussed with the members of the Royal Fleet Auxiliary and we've discussed with Ministry of Defence. And we've made it clear that we don't think the offer that they're able to bring forward by itself is good enough, and we don't think the warm words that the members have been hearing from the Ministry of Defence and from RFA leadership for the last decade are good enough anymore. So we're looking for tangibles. We're looking for things that actually can demonstrate commitment and things that have consequences for failure to meet deadlines, for failure to meet, sort of agreed steps. So that's what we're looking for with that. We were in talks with the Ministry of Defence on Tuesday, which was the 12th of November. The talks that we had seemed fairly clear. They were very frank and open, and being able to engage in talks like that is very helpful at this stage of a dispute, where we can very much just hone in on what the key resolutions need to be looking like in order for the dispute to be resolved, and in order for us to be able to present something to the members that they might actually find acceptable. We have been consistently listening to the views of all of the members that we have at RFA. We have surveyed them across the disputes, across when action's being taken, when we've been out on picket lines and at demonstrations with them. We've listened to what they've got to say so that we are fully aware of what we believe is going to take to solve this, to allow us to move forward and to deliver more meaningful change and reform for the future that's going to put the RFA in a position where it is a growing service. Because what is quite clear is the need for Royal Fleet Auxiliary is they've been demonstrated time and time again. The need for the people that deliver the operations of the Royal Fleet Auxiliary is essential. And with the retention challenges that the poor pay, poor working conditions is having, that is looking at being something that's a very, very much a concern for the future. So a lot of effort to resolve this now. We'll deal with the initial retention challenges with some medium and longer term efforts to get the RFA into a position where it needs to be for the future, where it is more than capable of supporting the Royal Navy and the Royal Marines and fulfilling its tasking.
Yeah, well, those negotiations I know will carry on, and very best of luck with those. Now we have the renewed mandate for action short of a strike and strike action. Is there any word on that as yet? Or is that something that's still being planned?
So what we're doing is we are, whilst engaged in conversations, talks, discussions with the employer, we are still building up plans and strategies as to when will be the most effective times to take further action, when will be the most effective time to recommend industrial action short of a strike, and when will be the most effective times to and patterns to pick for any strike action. So whilst in the immediate future there are no plans as yet to move towards a resumption of industrial action, it is likely that if progress isn't being made in the discussions, that we will need to revisit that point and to make sure that we use the mandate that the members have given us to try and deliver further leverage to put us in a position where the discussions can be resolved with a bit more speed and pace.
Great. Thank you, Martin. Well, thanks again for the update and best of luck in the negotiations. And I'm sure we'll talk soon about it.
Thank you, Rob.
We're going to talk now about an important piece of research commissioned by Nautilus. It's called the Maritime Barometer, and Helen here was the main driving force behind it. So I'm going to ask Helen all about it. Helen, what were the main aims of the Maritime Barometer research?
Yeah, so this research project really was driven by our members who asked us to tackle what we call sea blindness, which is where members of the public here in the UK and elsewhere don't really have a lot of understanding of the importance of the maritime industry and the jobs that our members do. So this is the third time that we've done this body of research, which is really good. We're gathering lots of good data that we can compare over the years, and we can use that data and that feedback from the public in our campaigns work. And of course, it was the driving force behind the launch of our podcast, Of Course, a Sideways Look at Life at Sea, where we interview seafarers, people who work on board ships, to try and show the public what work that they do.
And this time, so you mentioned that it's taken place 3 times now. Mm-hmm. What were the main findings of the research this time, and how does it compare with previous years?
Yeah, really interesting. So one of the things, as I mentioned, that we're trying to look at is this idea of sea blindness and how much awareness does the public have about working at sea. This time, slightly more awareness of maritime trade, in that 1% of people know that over 90% of the goods that we consume in this country come on board ship. I mean, obviously that's a small amount, but it is more people than last time, which was something
good
like
news.
Good news. We'll take any good news, obviously. Last time it was about 1 in 1,000 people, so really very, very small percentages of people there. So that is good news. However, on the flip side, less people this time round are willing to consider a career at sea. Last year it was 35% of respondents. This year 30%. So unfortunately, there seems to be a bit of a decline in the attractiveness or perceived attractiveness of working at sea.
So Helen, you mentioned that we're going to use the findings of the research in our campaigning and lobbying work. Can you give an example of how we'll do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the questions we asked this time round, it was a new question because we did this research at about the same time as the UK general election. We asked respondents, would they support the idea of any maritime business that got government funding, public money, if that investment was tied to training for maritime professionals? And a really strong cohort, 71%, a majority of respondents said yes, they would absolutely support any government that would tie training to public investment. So we are able to use that really strong response in our lobbying and campaigns work, and we're very much going to take that to government and feed that back in terms of our ask for a national maritime training board to be set up to help future seafarers.
Obviously, we're going to use the report for our own campaigning, but we welcome other organisations, don't we, sort of having a look at this good information, using it to inform their own work. How can people find a copy of the report?
Yeah, absolutely. We would love any organisation who is an ally and a supporter of our Merchant Navy workforce to download a copy of a report off our website. That's www.nautilusint.org. You can find that in our resources section. And if anybody's got any further questions on that, please do get in touch.
Great, thanks very much.
We recently held our online-only UK branch conference with the theme of AI in maritime. Rob and Sarah, we all attended, didn't we? Can you explain, Sarah, a little bit about what a UK branch conference is, please?
Yes, so this is basically our annual general meeting, except that it happens every 2 years. And it's only for the UK part of Nautilus. And it's run by our Chair of Council, Ian Mackenzie. And basically what we have to do is present to members the work that the Nautilus has been doing. So we have what's basically an AGM report, and individuals from our staff explain what their particular departments or subject areas have been doing. But you mentioned that it is the theme of AI, and at this particular conference we tried something a bit different. We actually have, instead of the individuals reading out their reports, we've got AI avatars to do it. Can you tell us a bit more about how that worked, Helen?
Yes, we absolutely, a bit of an experiment, wasn't it? And a little bit confronting to have yourself represented by an AI at a conference like this, but really interesting as well. So we had an AI do our voice and also some video as well. Some of them worked better than others and certainly showed the restrictions, shall I say, of the technology. It's not perfect. I don't think it's coming for our jobs just yet, thank goodness. But this AI theme in maritime, it is something that is worrying our members, isn't it? They're unsure of long-term job security, ship automation, and the quality of their jobs. Rob, what were the kind of main themes, main concerns that we were talking about?
Yeah, so our members are obviously a bit worried that with any technological change, there could be knock-on effects on their own roles. We did survey our members on these issues before, and some of the real key concerns was that this technology should be used to make things easier and better for them, to remove some of the real unpleasant parts of the role by automating it, but not be used as an excuse by companies to reduce crewing levels on board. That's the really big concern. In fact, at the branch conference, a motion was put forward that members voted on and were in favour of that commits Nautilus now to work towards that, to try and make sure that the technology is being used to increase safety and improve jobs rather than used to take jobs away.
Yeah, absolutely. We don't want to reduce the number of seafarers on board vessels, but perhaps reduce some of that paperwork or the emails or, you know, some of the kind of drudgery, for want of a better word, on board ship.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it was a really interesting conference and we can show you some key highlights from it now.
Dear colleagues, it is my absolute pleasure to extend a very warm welcome to all members and invited guests for this online branch conference. This year's theme, AI in Maritime, is a timely opportunity to consider transformative technology that is reshaping our industry, bringing both opportunities and challenges. Today we will explore how AI can enhance safety, efficiency and sustainability in maritime operations. We will also address the critical need for regulations and standards to ensure that these advancements benefit all maritime professionals. At Nautilus, we are proud to be at the forefront of these discussions. Our campaigns have always been driven by the needs and aspirations of our members. From securing better working conditions to advocating for fair wages, our collective efforts have led to significant victories. This year, we have made strides in closing legal loopholes and ending unfair practices like fire and rehire. Our success in challenging negotiations and industrial actions has caught the attention of policymakers, proving that when we stand together, we can achieve remarkable outcomes. As we delve into the world of AI, let's remember that technology should serve to enhance our skills and improve our working lives, not replace us. We must ensure that the human element remains at the heart of maritime operations. Our expertise, experience and dedication are irreplaceable. Our commitment to diversity and inclusion is at the heart of everything we do.
We believe that a diverse and inclusive workforce is essential for innovation and success, and that technology can be a unifying force if used for the collective good. We are dedicated to creating an environment where everyone feels valued and respected. This commitment is reflected in our policies, our campaigns, and our daily operations. We strive to ensure that all voices are heard and that everyone can contribute to our collective success. Equally important is our commitment to sustainability and environmental responsibility as part of a just transition. As maritime professionals, we have a unique role in ensuring that our industry operates in an environmentally responsible manner. We are actively involved in advocating for policies that support sustainable maritime practices. Our goal is to lead by example and inspire others in the industry to prioritise the health of our planet and sustainable jobs. Here at Nautilus, we have become much more digital all round, as evidenced by our AI-themed conference. We now offer the opportunity for members to attend our forums online, allowing participation from vessels, ports, harbours and homes around the UK and the world. And you may have realised by now that it is not really me, Mark Dickinson, your General Secretary, making this speech, but an AI version of me. It's all very strange and slightly disconcerting to hear yourself in AI form. We have more examples of how AI is being used throughout this event. I encourage you all to actively engage and share your insights with our guest speakers and panelists. This conference is an opportunity to learn, collaborate, and shape the future of our industry and your union. Thank you for being here and for your unwavering commitment to Nautilus. Together we are a powerful force for positive change. Let's make this branch conference another important milestone in our journey towards a just transition and a brighter, more innovative future in maritime. Welcome once again, and let's get started.
Also at the UK branch conference, we heard about our recent industrial successes here at Nautilus International. And Rob, I know you've been speaking to our Director of Organising, Martin Gray, about those. Can you give us a bit of a flavour, please?
Yeah, sure. So we had some really positive news this year, especially on pay negotiations, where we've seen some really strong results from the industrial team based on some really hard work, and also based on our members participating in those. Obviously, member involvement is really key to getting good results in pay and conditions negotiations. The more members we have at the company, the more leverage we have, the more we can bring pressure to bear and get those strong results. We also had good results again for the yacht team, recovering a lot of unpaid wages over the last year. So yeah, all around, the industrial team's put in some great work over 2024 so far.
Yeah, sure. And that's, clear examples of why it's really good to be a part of a union. So thank you very much, Rob. And we can go to that interview with Martin Gray now.
In the last few years, high inflation has been eating away at people's spending power. And I think it's fair to say that pay has been at the forefront of a lot of people's minds. So today I'm speaking with our Director of Organising, Martin Gray, about the money. What results have our industrial organisers managed to achieve for members over the past year in the wake of that high inflation? And is union membership a good investment for maritime professionals financially?
So if we go for the top line figures, if we look at the collective bargaining increases for 2024 so far, we're looking at an average of 5.9% improvement. A median improvement of 5.5%, and we've got bounds within that that's somewhere between 12.7%, which was at the top end of what we managed to achieve on average for one particular employer, and a minimum of 2.5%, which was the lowest that we've been able to achieve in terms of an agreed improvement.
And so people are probably wondering, like, what does that translate into? So inflation over that period, I believe we used the retail price index to establish what that was, and I believe that was at 2.7%. So that means your money is basically worth 2.7% less than it was at the beginning of the period. And you say the sort of average improvement for our members was 5.9%. So obviously that means their spending power has actually increased over that period by quite a significant amount. Am I right about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So even if we look at the median, which is when we look at all of the collective bargaining agreements that Nautilus International in the UK has concluded so far in 2024, when we're looking across that, the one that sits right in exactly the middle of those results, the median result is 5.5%. So if we take away inflation, which September 2024 for the 12-month period from there was 2.7%. So if we take that away, we're looking at a real terms improvement of 3.7%. So that's their salary actually is worth in purchasing power 3.7% more than what it was at the same period in 2023.
And staying with industrial successes, Nautilus Federation Union, the Masters, Mates and Pilots, has had its biggest win in 50 years. Rob, I know that you spoke with Tom Larkin from that union about that success. Can you tell us a little bit more about it, please?
Yeah, so just as a bit of background, the Nautilus Federation is a group of like-minded trade unions that come together under that banner to give us more negotiating power internationally. So we're always really glad to hear when one of those federation unions has had a big success. Masters, Mates and Pilots is a US-based union, and they have organised deck officers across a couple of different companies really successfully. As you say, it's the biggest organising effort in 50 years. And those new members will now have access to a lot of extra jobs and extra opportunities that they wouldn't have had otherwise.
Really good news, and we can cut to that interview with Tom Larkin now.
There's actually two companies that we organized. One's called OSG, Overseas Shipping Group, and there's another one called Alaska Tanker Company, which is a subsidiary of OSG. And it's basically the licensed deck officers, the chief mate down to the third mate, that we now represent. We started this organizing campaign probably about a year and a half ago or so, maybe a little bit longer ago. Even prior to the pandemic, I was kind of reaching out and talking to some people.
Was it some of the deck officers that came to you and said, we really want to organise it? And why was it? What was the situation there that motivated all this?
Everybody kind of knows each other, so we always been kind of talking to these guys. But I guess the catalyst of this was, during the pandemic, OSG laid off quite a few people, from their fleet, and it kind of left a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths. The working conditions, obviously they had an issue with some of the training that these guys have to take to go to chief mate and master. The company wasn't necessarily paying directly for that. They would make the guys pay for it, and then they would reimburse them only when they started sailing chief mate, which is kind of a big issue for these guys. So there was just a number of issues that came up, and I think the biggest thing what MMP has to offer is opportunity. We market ourselves as the largest deck officer union in the country, and there's a wide variety of contracts you can work on, from inland ferries and tugboats to actual marine pilots, navigating in and out of different ports, to deep sea work.
We're back, and joining me now is my colleagues Deborah McPherson and Amy Field. Hello.
Hiya. Hi.
And Amy, you recently attended Unions 21 trade union renewal event on behalf of Nautilus International. Can you tell us a little bit about the event and perhaps some key takeaways from it?
So it was really interesting because we had people from across the trade union movement from all sorts of industries, and with the proposed legislation coming up that will hopefully get rid of a lot of the really restrictive legislation that we were previously dealing with, it was really about how do we energise a trade union movement to make the best of this, these new conditions. How do we make the best of these new rights that we now have, and how do we also go into unionised new sectors? So there was a really interesting case study about, I believe, the Financial Services Union in Ireland and how they unionised game sector workers. by giving these workers more autonomy within their own part of the union and allowing them the spaces to really speak out about what was going on in their industry and making the union relevant for them. And it really reminded me of what we're doing here at Nautilus for our yacht workers, which is, again, a sector which isn't traditionally unionised. So this is what I mean about having all these different unions coming together and talking about what's been working and what doesn't.
Yeah, it sounds like a really good opportunity to hear from a wide breadth of people in the trade union movement. As somebody like yourself, you're relatively new to Nautilus International, relatively new to trade unionism. What kind of benefits did you find from being part of an event like that?
So it was a brilliant opportunity for me because I am very new to the trade union movement. But it was very good to be part of what was a very open forum for discussion. So we had experts come in to talk about various different factors affecting all trade unions. And then it was really interesting talking to others afterwards about how we're applying this to our own work. So there was one really interesting talk about AI and what that means for trade unions going forward. And I think having that platform to discuss it with trade unionists who are working in very different contexts, but being able to take on what the experts were saying, but also to discuss it amongst, people from across the movement was really, really useful.
Yeah.
And it's definitely something that I'm going to be taking back now that I'm at Nautilus.
Yeah, absolutely. So to have that forum to discuss similar issues across the trade union movement, really very important to have. And I understand that after the event, you managed to have an interview with Executive Director Becky Wright. What did you discuss in that interview?
So a lot of it was really continuing what we were talking about at the Unions 21 event. And something that we really picked up on as well is young people and trade unions, which is something that I think people often talk about, young people, but they tend to put young people in a bit of a bubble without actually talking about what conditions young people in different sectors are facing. So again, we really took it back to what's going on at Nautilus of our cadets and yacht workers as well, who were a large proportion of our younger membership, and talking about how, we can talk about young people in trade unions all we like, but what it really is about is us picking up on the specific issues facing young workers and allowing young people to have the autonomy to make the union work for them. Because when we were also, something we picked up on was within trade union structures, quite often you have this committee, that person over there who's on this committee. It's very confusing. And how do you open up trade union spaces? How do you make them more democratic?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we can go to that interview now and hear a little bit more from Becky Wright about making unions more democratic.
We've known for a while that young workers are open to unions if it is explained to them in a way that connects with their values and with what people kind of want. And this sort of go back right to your first question, very first question, one of your first questions, right, which is that this is a massive challenge for unions, which is how do you evolve, keeping true to values, keeping true to the reasons why you're there, but also kind of dealing with the realities of the now and of the future, right? So if people are saying, oh, we think we can negotiate our pay better on our own than we can as part of a collective, how do you explain that to people, and how do you kind of take them on that journey and kind of try and bring them, because nobody is born a trade unionist, right? Nobody is sort of like we all kind of come, especially those of us who don't come from a union family, right? We kind of find it and they're like, oh right, oh okay.
Yeah.
Wearable technology is being used to measure the impact of social interaction on seafarers' mental health. is a research study being undertaken by the International Seafarers Welfare and Assistance Network. And Deborah, I know that you have been covering this topic and speaking with some of the main researchers. Can you tell us what they're looking for and why, please?
Yes, thanks, Helen. Well, this is a research project being undertaken by ICEWAN that's been going on since slightly before COVID-19. So that during those two phases, the first two phases, they had a lot of data about the impact and the negative impact on seafarers from the pandemic, including the fatigue and the lack of shore leave. But also, they got so much data, they decided to extend it to this third phase to look at the social interaction and how important that is to seafarers' mental health on board. And that uses, interestingly, like 3 different elements which are all going on. So you've got the Fitbit, which is the wristband, so that's the wearable tech. And then we have some mobile technology, which is like pushing questions to the seafarers every day about how they're feeling, so the wellbeing data. And then there's some humans who are the volunteer crew, which they're calling social ambassadors. And so the 3 of them are working together to provide all this data to ICEWAN about the impact of basically getting to know your crew members and how important that is.
Yeah, it sounds really fascinating. Is there any initial findings that you can share with us, or is it too early days?
Well, the initial findings from the first 2 phases showed quite clearly the negative impacts of COVID, but it also showed that having the ability to get to know the crew, have social activities together, that kind of provides a mental reset, if you like. And getting to know each other has been important in developing relationships with each other, and the whole sort of caring about each other that's having positive mental health aspects.
Yeah, it sounds great.
Yeah, there is a lot going on.
Yes, sounds like it, but it's in its 3rd phase from what you've said.
Yes.
And I understand that you've managed to have a conversation with the lead researcher, Dr. Kate Pike. How did that go?
It was really interesting, and Dr. Pike laid the foundations for all the research, what it all involves, why, and who's taking part. I mean, there's 200 crew now volunteering across 3 different maritime industries. So you've got super yacht crew, cruise ships, and commercial vessels. And that's moved that on further from the previous, where they had a lot of anecdotal information and surveys because they couldn't interview people, obviously, during COVID on board.
Oh, that sounds brilliant. And I understand that we can go to a clip of those interviews now.
I only see this project as a positive, having a positive effect on the marine industry as a whole. I think we have a unique opportunity with the program we have to help raise the standards, not only in the yachting industry, but in all sectors in the maritime industry. Yacht is not an inanimate object. It is a living, breathing, delicate ecosystem, and the crew is at its very core. And I truly think that creating a positive, healthy, and happy environment on board for the crew is really, when you peel back all the onion layers, that's right in the center of it.
Oh, thank you. And overall, what has it been like to record all this data on board?
So a couple of things that I think have been hugely beneficial to us as a team. So when we were getting asked the questions, and this is actually a byproduct, when we were receiving each day a text message about, are you feeling valued within your team? Have you had enough time outside? It was a really great reminder for us as leaders within the team, within, the Savannah program, to kind of take stock. Have we provided enough rest for our crew? Have we given enough positive feedback? These things do affect mental health. And so each day there was a little reminder when, in fact, the message was asking us, have we received these things? But importantly, are we giving them to our crew? Are we being the leaders we want to be? So I think that was actually an incredibly positive experience that I didn't actually anticipate or really, I didn't expect that at all.
Now to hear from Dr. Kate Pike, the lead researcher on the project. Why is being sociable on board so important for crew mental health?
The sim research previously has shown that social interaction, it facilitates a mental reset, if you like, a rest from work. This is really important on board because you often have a blurring between your work and rest environment, because seafarers are living and working continuously in the same place. So when crew get to know each other through social interaction, it builds stronger relationships and it promotes mental health.
And finally, in the latest episode of our podcast, we go on board one of the world's biggest container ships with Captain Mark Maguire, the straight-talking, no-nonsense star of TikTok, who is demystifying the shipping industry one journey at a time.
Captain is the person in overall command of the ship. The buck stops here,
oh, yes.
shall we say. Yeah, and I'm the liaison between the shore side and everything that happens at sea. And if anything happens on board in an emergency, for example, I'm in charge of all that. I have to make sure everything's okay for the crew, plan the passages with our second officer to make sure we get from A to B when we're supposed to. Our budgets, very important these days, look after all the budgets on board, and generally just be the person who's always there 24/7 should something go awry. And that's the main purpose of my job, is to be overall commander.
So the buck stops with you. You're the person ultimately who is responsible for the ship, for its cargo, for the crew, for the safety, as you said, the planning and the money, for want of a better word, the budgets. You're the ultimate responsibility. I mean, it's a lot of responsibility. You are on board these huge ships, and I do recommend anybody who has not seen your content, definitely go onto TikTok so you can get a visual understanding of how big these ships are. But for those viewers who haven't followed you yet, can you describe, just the sheer scale of what you're in charge of?
She's one of the post-Panamax ships. So if you can think about the old style of vessels where you had the accommodation block and the bridge and everything towards the back of the ship, and then you had the rest of it on in front, these ones are now set up so that that's further towards the forward end, and then you have a funnel in the middle, and it just looks like a big Lego ship, basically. Big blue ship with lots of Lego blocks on top of it, and a bit of smoke puffing out on this end, and then a few windows up the front that we can look out at. And it's 353 meters long, 53 meters wide, and we can carry just over 15,000 TEU, which are 20-foot containers. So if you think about 7,500 articulated lorry loads of containers on board any one time, above and below deck. So
I'm glad you said that. Yeah, because I was about to put it into context of a road vehicle, because that's probably how most people will see these shipping containers. They'll see a lorry going past them, or they will pass a lorry on the motorway, right, and think nothing of it. But this is, a single version of what you are carrying many thousands of on board your ship.
Yeah. So you can carry, in most holds, you can stack them 10 high under deck. So you can stack up 10 lorries and then 20 something wide, and then 10 high above deck again. So it's extremely large. Until you actually walk up next to one, it's very hard to get a sense of scale and how big they are. And there's a lot of it underwater as well as above water as well. They're very, very deep ships.
A lot that
the largest ones in the world. Yeah, the largest ones now carry about 24,000 TEU. So they're getting bigger and bigger all the time. So that's 9,000 containers more than the ship I'm carrying, and that's already really, really big. So huge ships,
huge. And most people would never have that ability to walk up alongside, right? It's not like the general public can get generally anywhere near these ships because they're in a port. It's a safe location. You don't have access. So to be able to fully understand that scale really is through videos like your own, on social, that they'll come in contact with them.
Yeah, because I've done a lot of videos about it being a little bit of an invisible industry. We have ISPS is a big thing, which is basically security around ships and around the ports, because there's lots of money involved and there's lots of potential for nefarious things to happen inside the ports, and smuggling, and the potential for them to be used as what we say, something for nefarious means, put something in the container like an explosive or anything like that. So it's extremely tight, and you can't just walk up. Years ago, you would go down into a city, and the ports were wide open, and you could walk past the ships, and everything was wide open. There's still a few places like that, I guess. General cargo ships and that. If you go to Cork City, for example, you can have a walk along the quays. But container ports are very much locked away behind heavy security gates and that. And so what I wanted to do was give people a bit of visibility into an industry that is hidden behind those gates. And it's been really positive. People are super, super interested, especially people who are in the transport industry and can get quite close, but can never get in for an actual proper viewing. So everybody's very appreciative of just being able to get up close to one of these things.
Right. Well, I count myself, myself as part of that as well. I mean, I'm in the maritime industry. I've been reporting as a journalist on the maritime industry for nearly 20 years now, but I've never got as close as, that to one of these mega container ships. So yeah, I absolutely love the videos and the content that you're doing. Yeah, no problem. And I'd love to see more.
It's funny because it's old rope for me, it's just one of those things that I do. It's my other life. I have my life here at home, and I have my life at sea. And even the most simple things people are super interested in, like where we sleep, what we eat, how do the toilets work, that kind of thing.
And do you even have toilets?
We do. We definitely have those.
Yeah, I mean, these are modern ships. We're not just talking about, some basic kinds of accommodation here, aren't we? Particularly working for a big company like Maersk. You've got all the mod cons, don't you?
You really do, yeah. And I've had guys who have commented saying they were at sea in the 70s and even the 80s, and it's completely different now. It looks much more comfortable, much cleaner. Everybody's got their own individual cabin with an ensuite.
Nice.
You've got a cinema room and a gym. You get your 3 square meals a day. Even people are asking, like, do you have to pay for your food?
Yeah.
Which is something that we just take for granted. It's like, no, that's part of your employment, is that you get fed.
Yes.
And you get somewhere to stay, and you get paid and all that, and they're oh, okay, yeah, because for some reason people just thought that you had to, like working in an office, sometimes you might have to pay across, a couple of euros, a couple of pounds to get your sandwiches or whatever. But
Absolutely.
it's not like that. See, it's all covered.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, that is a really good example there of the lack of awareness. And why should people know? I mean, how would you know unless you've been away to sea, right? But I mean, I'm an office worker. I don't get my lunch paid for, my dinner's paid for. So, there's got to be some perks of being away from home for so long. But I think you also raise an important point there, because actually, until very recently, water wasn't something that you would be necessarily provided for free under regulations. It was only, I think, the Maritime Labour Convention, which is, a bit of international regulation that gives seafarers various benefits and protections while they're at sea. It was only within the last couple of years that it was updated to mandate that water must be free.
Yeah, amazingly,
which is mad.
It is, yeah. And MLC has really changed the game for in a positive way for a lot of people, between rest hours, having ventilation, having heating, water, all that kind of stuff. Everything that we take for granted at home, that wasn't strictly provided for to everybody working at sea, and even getting paid, every month. Things like that, so it's an extremely important piece of legislation that is very welcomed by us at sea.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we have gone deep very quickly.
But
MLC is absolutely, something that the trade union movement, supports and encourages. And Nautilus itself, we negotiate alongside other partners, trade union partners, on that international stage to try and tighten that regulation and get more protections for seafarers. So I'm really pleased to hear that it's welcomed by, people that it is being affected.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And best of luck to, and long may it continue.
And that wraps up this Nautilus TV episode for today. Thank you so much for being with us. You can, of course, watch more union content on our YouTube channel. Just make sure that you subscribe, like, and share that with friends and colleagues. Remember to stay connected with your maritime trade union, because together we are stronger. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.